Well, let's talk about bridging the connectivity gap in rural America as we continue to see more need for internet connectivity and connectivity across the farm and ranch with new technology. How do we fill that gap? How do we fill that void? Well, Emergent is trying to help in that area. And here to tell us more about some of the work they are doing, he is the CEO of Emergent, Mike Rohde. Mike, it is great to talk with you, sir. Hope all is well.
I appreciate you having me here, Jesse.
Can you, just for starters, to give folks a background on the company, can you tell us a little bit more about Emergent?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Emergent is a relatively new company in ag tech. The management team and the co-founders have been building connectivity networks for almost 40 years. But really, what we have is we describe our company in three pillars. One is we are filling that connectivity gap. So we literally build networks. The network that we build uses a very specific type of IoT technology, and IoT is the Internet of Things. So I always like to say when you're thinking about smart farming, precision ag, it's all the devices that are connected to the Internet. And if you put the word smart in front of any noun, that literally means it's connected to the Internet. So the IoT network we build uses a global standard technology called LoRaWAN, and I bring that up for one reason. It has two characteristics that make it perfect for the ag industry. One is LoRa stands for long range, so we could talk to devices that are miles away, as opposed to cellular, which is just a couple of miles. But in the Midwest, in a flat area, we could talk to a device that is 15, 20, sometimes 25 miles away. So that's really important. The second thing that's equally important for the same reason is this network operates in low power mode, meaning the device battery life lasts for years. It varies based on device, but you put a simple soil moisture sensor or a humidity sensor for a storage bin or a grain bin, and that device can last for a half a decade on a single charge, which is really important because again, out in the farm, you get out into the farmlands, you can't drag extension cords over 2,000 acres. Um, and that's really the network that we build, and we use that to fill those holes that plague the industry, right? And being the more rural, the more remote your networks are, the less likely you're going to have cellular across the entire farm. And we like to say, technology only matters if it works on the entire farm, right? And I would argue that's one of the great barriers to ag tech adoption that we're trying to close. The second pillar of our business is we actually sell the whole IoT solution because what we very quickly learned, especially in other parts of the industry, is nobody really buys connectivity. Even in your home, you don't wake up one morning and say, I'd like to buy more Wi-Fi. What you do buy are all the things that are enabled by the connectivity. You buy all those smart devices, your wireless doorbell cameras, your Nest thermostat, your Wi-Fi enabled garage door opener, which I didn't know existed until 3 months ago because now I have one. And if you apply that to ag tech, all of these sensors that are out in the market is really what drives the ROI and the value creation for the farmer. They require connectivity. So we sell curated packages of sensors and connectivity, and we bundle them all up. But we will support anything a farmer has on their farm. But it's just really the way to open the conversation with an ag retailer, with a farmer. And then the third part of our business is all that technology is mildly interesting in their first two silos. But when you bring it all together in a single visual platform so that a farmer, a rancher, a grower can see everything that's going on their farm on a single monitor like we're talking on now, and we call that product our field vision product. That really just gives you um, an integrated look at everything that's going on, and then we allow the devices themselves to talk to each other, right? If a motion sensor in a room or a storage bin goes off, you can then take action using other sensors, and that's really where the magic happens.
It's an interesting thing to think about. I think a lot of times, and I've had many conversations on this program about the rural broadband issues that are out there and just the need for revitalizing, expanding that infrastructure. But really, Mike, what we're talking about goes even farther beyond that. It's one thing to get high speed internet connectivity to the farmhouse somewhere on the end of a gravel road in the middle of Nebraska, but it's another thing to be able to use all of this smart technology and all these pieces that could make the job of farming and ranching easier across a farm that might be 10, 15, 25, 50 miles, square
Mhm.
miles, et cetera, et cetera. So it's almost like you got one piece of just the rural broadband issue, but then it's taking it a step further to get this connectivity, right?
Jesse, that's exactly right. And that's really is how Emergent was founded. And the reason why Emergent was founded by our two co-founders, David Albert and Greg Jarman, because they started in the rural broadband piece. And then when we all hooked up together, we actually came to the very quick conclusion that all the initiatives around rural broadband, and they all really stem from the pandemic of COVID. There's not a lot of good things that came out of COVID, but one of the really good things was the amount of government subsidies that poured into extending rural broadband in the communities. But really, what that focused on was bringing rural broadband to the home, or in the case of the ag industry, to the farm gate. And that's insanely important. There is a place for that. They just we couldn't be having this interview if we didn't have rural broadband or broadband in general available to us to have this interview over the internet. But what it didn't address was the connectivity over the field, right? So rural broadband literally stops, and frankly, from not to get into legal definitions, but all of those initiatives that were providing that funding stopped at the home or the farm gate. And so what we've done at Emergent is we are using that rural broadband and the expansion of it to bring all that data back to our network. But what we're really focused on is connecting the first acre. So we like to say things like, rural broadband is all about getting broadband to the last mile in the rural community, and then Emergent connects the first acre, the second acre, and then ultimately the last acre. And then we ensure that when we build our network, um, that the farmer has ubiquitous coverage all over his farm. Hence our point on, like, technology is really compelling when it works everywhere. And the only thing worse than not having access to the technology is having access to a small portion or even a large portion, but then you got this big gap over a really important part of your business. It would be no different than, either in our homes or offices, if there were parts of our houses or our offices that you didn't have Wi-Fi connection, or and we've all experienced this where you don't have cellular connection in some, the basement of your home or some part of your office because you're like really deep in the building, and it's a problem. And that's really what we focus on solving. And our the Emergent Connects network, which is our branded name, we deploy our own network, that LoRa network we were talking about. But if a farmer has cellular um, access on parts of his farms, if they have cellular devices, we'll incorporate that right into our platform, because our we believe our job is to give the farmer a holistic solution. So, we're not here to dictate, hey, you have to use this network or this protocol. I've been in the telecom industry for 40 years, almost 40 years. And the one thing I say to people is that in the telecom industry, there are all kinds of communication technologies that coexist next to each other. You have fiber, you have broadband,
Mhm.
you have what we call DOCSIS or cable broadband, you have satellite, and there's a role for all of those. And where we get into trouble is when we try to shoehorn the same solution into every application, because this is what causes the dilemma in rural America, is that bringing fiber out into these rural footprints gets incredibly expensive, and therefore nobody does it, and that's what causes the gap. So our belief is, look, we will build the network. We're committed to doing that, but we're also going to work with all these other technologies so that the user, and in this case, the farmer, grower, rancher, has a complete solution and has all the tools that somebody in a big city has. That's really what we get passionate about.
Emergent CEO Mike Rohde is with us as we talk about bridging that connectivity gap in rural America. And I may be oversimplifying this a little bit, but it's almost as if you think about, you have your Wi-Fi router in your home, and that's the center, that's the hub of your activity to give you the coverage in your home. It's almost kind of like you guys are taking that and plopping a router, quote unquote, or connectivity in the middle of the farm, essentially, is what it kind of boils down to. If I'm oversimplifying that a little bit, Mike.
Yeah, it's simplified, but I actually use that analogy. I like to say, you know what, the IoT network that we build, that we
Yeah.
deploy, is Wi-Fi on steroids. And there's some really key differences that are worth mentioning. Number one, um, the way we build our network is we actually partner with people in the industry like rural internet service providers who already have cell towers. They already have power at the base station of a cell tower. Um, and they have what we call backhaul, which is their actual internet backbone. We will partner with them, and then what we do is we put that router. We call them gateways. It's a carrier grade industrial strength router, and we mount it at 100 feet in the air, so it has really broad coverage. And then that's how we provide the service. And that gateway or that router can talk to a device that's 15, 20, sometimes 25 miles away. But your analogy is spot on. That is precisely what we do. What's what's really important to understand the differences is this IoT network that we deploy is what we call carrier grade, which means it's incredibly high capacity. We can handle thousands and thousands of simultaneous devices connecting. And then another really important attribute, which is different than Wi-Fi, is it is highly secure. That data from the device to the gateway is encrypted using 128-bit encryption keys. So a farmer's data is safe. Unlike Wi-Fi, where you have public Wi-Fi, that is wide open, and it's what we call best effort. Like if too many people are on, then Jesse, you can't get on it until somebody gets off. We guarantee the capacity when we sell our services to our farmer. There is no issue that they need to worry about, that they'll have, that they'll have service at the most busy time of the day.
And I'd love your perspective on this, Mike, because I feel like with all the advancements we've seen with smart farming and ag tech and all the different products that are being created and that are already available to try and make our jobs on the farm and ranch easier, connected livestock, connected crops, you name it, all these things that are out there. But yet, for us to get to that next chapter, it's almost like if we don't catch up with the connectivity piece, it would almost make it harder to implement some of these smart farming types of products and techniques unless we, play catch up with the connectivity side of this.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And so I use an analogy or tell a story that, being from the telecom industry, I'm not from the ag industry. When I look as, the outsider looking in, um, what's kind of interesting about this industry is it kind of went straight to the ag tech, and it kind of skipped the foundation part, which is you need to have consistent and persistent internet connectivity. It can come in all shapes and sizes. Like I said before, it can come from different places and have different protocols, but it has to be available. Internet, all the wonderful things we do on the internet today in our personal lives didn't really happen until it was widely available in our communities, because then people start developing technology. They start developing, in the personal world, we start developing apps. Then all of a sudden Netflix happens and you're like, holy cow, I could watch a high def movie from my home. That's not what the internet was built for. But then really smart people started working on it. And now, lo and behold, today, you could buy a car or you could buy a tractor on the internet and know the price to the penny before you step in a store. That was never the intent. And I think ag tech is kind of in a similar place in that the industry kind of skipped to, hey, we got these really great ideas on the technology, and nobody really said, oh, by the way, what are we going to connect to? So a lot of really unnatural things happen. Farmers were required to build their own networks. Hey, you got to get the connectivity out here, or this stuff you just bought won't work. That's a horrible experience, right? Or then those ag tech companies that want to sell their solutions would start deploying their own connectivity. And again, then what you end up with is these incredibly fragmented solutions. And then you get what we talk about a lot today are these like silos where data can't be shared across platforms and solutions don't talk to each other. Because I we just saw one of these the other day where a farmer had four or five different ag tech solutions, and they all had their own protocol, their own communicating protocol, which honestly makes no sense. I understand why it happened. It happened out of necessity, but it really de it de-leverages the industry. So what we believe, and the reason why we're so passionate about this, is we want to solve that first problem. And then once you solve the first problem, which is ensuring that a farmer, when he wakes up in the morning, he goes, yeah, I'm confident I have connectivity on my farm, so I can go have conversations about this really cool ag tech I see to show. Um, and I know it's going to work. And that's really what we're trying to solve for. Not the easiest problem to solve, but we want to make sure that a farmer has the same experience that a consumer does in their hometown, where they know that if I buy this connected app, or I buy a, a Ring doorbell camera, that I have Wi-Fi in my house and it's going to connect. And that, until that happens, all that other ag tech, I'm not going to say it's not valuable, but you are not maximizing the value of that technology unless it works on every acre of that farm.
Such an interesting perspective and things to think about. Mike, before we close out the conversation, anything final you would leave folks anything you would reiterate to them here today?
Yeah, look, I think there is an absolute technology revolution coming to agriculture. Many other industries, if you think about where manufacturing is, just in general, they use terms like manufacturing 4.0. Like they've done this three other times, right? And they have robots that can screw a nut on a John Deere tractor while it continues to move down, um, its tracks. The the ag industry, the farmers, the base of the industry, they haven't gone through that revolution yet. There's bits and pieces of it. A statistic that everybody quotes, and I think it's very true, is when you look at the industry, ag tech has only been deployed on, roughly speaking, about 25% of all farms. And one of the key reasons for that is that lack of connectivity, that consistent connectivity. So when that gets solved, either by companies like Emergent or other companies, if we don't do our jobs right, um, I think it's going to revolutionize the industry. And the one thing that I would say in closing on this is, when you go to tech shows, we were just in Tech Hub Live last week, and it's a spectacular show. But now everybody's talking about, like, how do we use AI? And I think that is a fascinating world, because I saw this stat that blew my mind: is every growing season more than 4 million data points comes off a farm. So it's impossible for a human being to process all of that. You're going to need AI engines and applications that do that. But if you don't have access to that real time data to get it into whatever technology you're using, you're never gonna you're never gonna get to the promised land. And I think that's why it's so important that we kind of focus on the unsexy part of this, which is, hey, we need coverage on every square inch of a customer's office. And in the case of a farmer, his office is his fields or his ranches.
Yeah. Great stuff. I know you guys have a ton of information available for people as well on the Emergent website if they want to learn more and have a conversation. You guys have a lot of resources there, don't you, Mike?
We have a ton of resources there. Every day we're putting up more and more white papers. We've started to organize those IoT solutions by families now, to make it easier to digest. Because the one of the challenges in this industry, when you talk about ag tech, you could very quickly get lost in trying to boil up the ocean. And so what we've done in Emergent is we've said, okay, let's break this down into basic blocks that somebody can chew on. We have a connected crop solution that has 5 or 6 of the top sensors that are all about soil health. We have connected ranges, that is all about animal tracking and animal health. We have connected farm ops that are things like the really mundane but highly important tasks that need to be automated, like tank monitoring and building, bin sensor monitoring, and all the things that drive operational costs out of the business. And you could just go on and on and on about those things. But I think it's really important. The last piece of advice I would give to a listener is you don't have to do ag tech for everything. Start with a single pain point that you have on your farm, on your ranch, at your specialty crop, whether it's automating irrigation to simply monitoring tanks so I don't have to send a guy out, because that's how all stories start. When you ask someone about how do they do something, it starts with, I got a guy. I send, he does this, and I'm not being sexist. It could be a woman, but I got a person that goes and do these things. And I think we want to reserve those people because labor is such an issue in this industry. You want to reserve those precious resources for doing the things that really add value to your business, i.e., helping you either improve your yields, drive efficiencies, and automate the rest of these things. So just pick one of those and start there.
EmergentConnects.com is where you can get more information. Yes, Emergent CEO Mike Rohde. Great conversation. Thanks for joining us. We'll look forward to having you back on the show again soon, Mike. Appreciate the time.
Absolutely, Jesse. Thanks for having me. Take care.